The 4,000-year story of Israel. Part 1, where the story really begins. This story does not begin in 1948. It does not begin in World War II. It does not even begin in the 20th century. This story begins nearly 4,000 years ago in one of the oldest regions in human history, Mesopotamia. At that time, the world looked completely different from the modern world we know today. There were no powerful global superpowers like the United States or the United Kingdom. There were no modern weapons, no airplanes, no satellites, and no technology that could connect the entire world in seconds. Instead, there were ancient civilizations trying to survive in a harsh and unpredictable world. Mesopotamia was not just a land. It was the place where human civilization truly began to grow. It was here that people first started building cities instead of living as wandering tribes. It was here that writing systems were developed so that history could be recorded. It was here that people began to create laws that would influence future generations. The land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers became one of the most important places in the history of humanity. But while powerful empires were rising and falling in Mesopotamia, something much more important was beginning quietly. A story that would not end after a few centuries. A story that would survive wars, empires, destruction, and exile. A story that would continue for thousands of years. And that story begins with one man, the journey of Abraham. Nearly 4,000 years ago, a man made a decision that would change history forever. His name was Prophet Abraham. Abraham was not a king. He was not a warrior. He did not lead a powerful army. He did not rule a massive empire. He was simply a man who believed in something that most people at that time could not understand. He believed that his people would one day become a great nation. According to ancient traditions, Abraham lived in Mesopotamia before he decided to leave everything behind. Leaving your homeland 4,000 years ago was not like traveling today. There were no maps. There were no safe roads. There were no cities where travelers could stop and rest safely. The world was full of danger. People had to walk long distances through deserts, mountains, and unknown territories. But Abraham still left. He did not leave because he wanted power. He did not leave because he wanted wealth. He left because he believed that his people had a future far greater than the world could see at that time. That journey became one of the most important journeys in religious and historical tradition. Generations passed after Abraham. His family grew into a large community. That community slowly became known as the Israelites. At that time, they were not powerful. They did not control land. They did not have a strong army. They were simply a group of families trying to survive in a difficult world. But history was about to change in a way that nobody could imagine. The move toward Egypt. As time passed, the descendants of Prophet Abraham moved toward Egypt. At that time, Egypt was one of the most powerful civilizations in the world. It had massive temples, strong armies, and powerful rulers who controlled large parts of the region. Egypt looked like a place where people could live safely and build a better future. At first, the Israelites lived peacefully in Egypt. They worked, built homes, and became part of society. But slowly, their lives began to change. Over time, they were no longer treated as equals. They were forced into slavery. They were made to work in extremely difficult conditions. Their freedom disappeared, and their future began to look dark and uncertain. For many years, they lived as slaves. Generations were born in slavery. People grew up without freedom. Many began to believe that their suffering would never end. But then a leader appeared who would change everything. The rise of Moses. His name was Prophet Moses. Moses was not just a leader. He became a symbol of hope for people who had lost hope. At a time when one of the most powerful empires in the world controlled their lives, Moses stood up and did something that many people believed was impossible. He challenged the power of Egypt. Standing against a powerful empire was extremely dangerous. Most people would never dare to do something like that. But Moses believed that his people deserved freedom. He believed that they should not live as slaves forever. And then history changed forever. The Exodus, the escape from slavery. One of the most powerful moments in history happened when Moses led his people out of Egypt. This moment later became known as the Exodus. This was not just a journey. It was the moment when a group of slaves began to see themselves as a nation. Leaving Egypt did not mean life became easy. In fact, life became even harder. They had no permanent home. They had no powerful nation to protect them. They had no strong army. They had only hope. For years, they struggled in the desert. They faced hunger, fear, and uncertainty. But something important happened during this time. They stopped thinking of themselves as just separate families. They began to think of themselves as one nation. That change would shape their future forever. A nation without a home. Even after gaining freedom, the Israelites did not immediately become a powerful nation. They struggled to survive. They moved from place to place. They faced enemies, challenges, and uncertainty. But they did not lose their identity. Many powerful empires disappeared during that time. Entire civilizations vanished. But the people who had once lived as slaves in Egypt did not disappear. Instead, they slowly grew stronger. Their story was no longer just about survival. It was becoming a story about identity. The story that would never end. What began in Mesopotamia nearly 4,000 years ago did not end in a few centuries. It continued through wars, destruction, exile, and tragedy. It continued through the rise and fall of powerful empires. It continued even when the Jewish people lost their land and were forced to live in different parts of the world. And centuries later, this story would once again become one of the most important stories in modern history, especially during World War II and the creation of Israel. But that part of the story comes later: the rise of a kingdom and the fall of a nation. The story of the Israelites did not end after the Exodus. In fact, that was only the beginning of a much bigger story. After leaving Egypt and surviving years in the desert, the Israelites finally reached the land they believed had been promised to them. But the land was not empty. Other tribes already lived there. Powerful kingdoms existed nearby. The Israelites were still not a strong nation. They did not have modern weapons. They did not have a powerful empire to protect them. They were still a small group of people trying to survive in a difficult world. But slowly, something began to change, from tribes to a nation. At first, the Israelites lived as separate tribes. Each tribe had its own leaders, its own traditions, and its own way of surviving. There was no strong central government. There was no powerful king ruling over all the people. This made them weak. Whenever powerful enemies attacked, the tribes had to defend themselves separately. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. Life was uncertain, and the future of the nation was never secure. But over time, the people realized something important. If they wanted to survive, they needed unity. They needed strong leadership. They needed someone who could bring all the tribes together and turn them into one powerful nation. And then history changed again. The rise of King David. A young boy changed the future of the entire nation. His name was King David. David was not born powerful. He was not the son of a king. He was not trained as a great warrior. In fact, he was just a shepherd boy. But sometimes history is changed not by powerful rulers, but by ordinary people with extraordinary courage. David became famous after defeating a giant warrior named Goliath. At that time, people believed that defeating such a powerful enemy was impossible, but David did not think like everyone else. He believed that courage and determination could defeat fear. That moment made him a hero. Years later, David became king. And for the first time, the Israelites were no longer just tribes struggling to survive. They became a strong and united nation. Under King David's leadership, the kingdom became more powerful than ever before. The people finally had something they had never truly experienced before: stability. For the first time in their history, they were not just surviving, they were growing. The Golden Age of the Kingdom. The period after King David is often remembered as one of the strongest moments in early Jewish history. The kingdom became more organized. Cities grew, trade increased, the nation became more stable than it had ever been before. For many people, it finally felt like the long struggle that began in Mesopotamia nearly 4,000 years earlier had finally led to something strong and permanent. But history does not always remain peaceful. Powerful empires were rising around them again, and once again, the future of the nation became uncertain. The fall of the kingdom. Over time, powerful enemies began to attack the kingdom. The Israelites were no longer the only people fighting for control of the land. Strong empires wanted to control the region because it was one of the most important areas in the ancient world. Cities were destroyed. Families were separated. Many people were taken as prisoners. The kingdom that once looked powerful began to fall apart. For the Jewish people, this was not just a political defeat. It was an emotional and spiritual tragedy. The nation they had built with so much struggle was disappearing. And then something happened that changed their history forever. The beginning of exile. The Jewish people were forced to leave their homeland. They were taken to different parts of the world. Families were separated. Communities were broken. People who had once lived together as one nation were suddenly living far away from each other. This moment became known as the beginning of the Jewish exile, one of the most painful periods in their history. But something surprising happened during this time. Instead of disappearing, the Jewish identity became stronger. Even when they lived in different parts of the world, they did not forget who they were. They did not forget where they came from. They did not forget the land that had once been their home. A nation without a country. For centuries, Jewish communities lived in different parts of the world. Some lived in Europe, some lived in the Middle East, some lived in North Africa. They learned new languages, they adapted to new cultures, they built new lives. But no matter where they lived, they never forgot their identity. Many powerful empires disappeared during those centuries. Entire civilizations vanished from history, but the Jewish people survived. Even without a country, they continued to exist as a nation. This is one of the most unique stories in human history. Most nations disappear when they lose their land. Most cultures vanish when they are forced to live far away from their homeland. But the Jewish people did not disappear. Instead, their story continued. The long wait, nearly 2,000 years. For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people lived without a country. Generation after generation grew up in foreign lands. Many people believed that the idea of a Jewish nation would never return. But history had not finished yet, because in the 20th century, the world would face one of the most tragic events in human history, World War II. And that war would change the future of the Jewish people forever. The war that changed everything and the birth of a nation. For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people lived without a country. They lived in different parts of the world. They learned new languages. They adapted to new cultures. They built new lives in different countries. But even after centuries, they never forgot who they were. Many powerful empires disappeared during those 2,000 years. Entire civilizations vanished from history. But the Jewish identity survived. Even without a country, the Jewish people continued to exist as a nation. Then the world entered one of the darkest periods in human history, World War II. The rise of Hitler. In the early 20th century, Europe was already facing political and economic problems. After the First World War, many countries were struggling. People were angry. Economies were weak. Fear was spreading everywhere. During this time, a man came to power in Germany whose ideas would shock the entire world. His name was Adolf Hitler. Hitler believed that some people were superior and others were not. He believed that Jewish people should not exist. This dangerous belief slowly turned into one of the most tragic events in modern history. At first, many people did not understand how serious the situation would become. But slowly, the lives of Jewish families in Europe began to change. They lost their jobs. They were treated unfairly. They were forced to leave their homes. Fear spread everywhere. But the worst was still coming. The tragedy that shocked the world. When World War II began, the situation became even more dangerous. Entire cities were destroyed. Millions of people lost their lives. But the Jewish people faced something even more tragic. Families were separated. Communities were destroyed. Entire generations disappeared. The world did not fully understand what was happening until the war ended. When the war finally ended in 1945, the world was shocked. People saw the destruction. They saw the suffering. They realized that something like this should never happen again. For the first time, world leaders began to think seriously about the future of the Jewish people. Many believed that after nearly 2,000 years without a homeland, and after the tragedy of World War II, the Jewish people deserved a country of their own. The creation of Israel, 1948, and then history changed forever. In 1948, a new country was officially created, Israel. For millions of Jewish people around the world, this moment felt like the end of a 4,000-year struggle. The story that began in Mesopotamia had finally reached one of the most important moments in modern history. But the story did not end there. Because the moment Israel was created, war began. A nation born in war. Several neighboring countries attacked immediately. Many people believed that the new country would not survive even a few weeks. Israel was small. It did not have a powerful army. It did not have strong resources. Many of the people living there had just survived the tragedy of World War II. But something unexpected happened. Instead of collapsing, the country fought back. People who had lost everything refused to give up again. This was not just a war for land, it was a war for survival. And that fear made the new nation stronger. Support from powerful countries. One of the biggest reasons why Israel survived those early years was the support it received from powerful countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. These countries helped in different ways. Sometimes it was political support, sometimes it was financial help, and sometimes it was simply recognition, telling the world that this country had the right to exist. This support gave the new nation time to grow stronger, turning the desert into a nation. When Israel was created, much of the land was desert. Water was limited. Farming seemed almost impossible. But instead of giving up, the people living there began to find new ways to survive. They created new farming methods. They learned how to grow crops in dry land. They built new cities from almost nothing. Slowly, the desert began to change. This became one of the most surprising stories in modern history. A country that once struggled to find water was now growing food and exporting it to other countries. From survival to power. As the years passed, Israel became stronger. Education became one of the most important priorities. Technology became a national focus. Young people were encouraged to study science and innovation. Within a few decades, the country that once struggled to survive became one of the most advanced nations in the world. Many people in the United States began to see Israel as an example of determination, survival, and strength. The story that still continues today. Israel is one of the most powerful and technologically advanced countries in the world. But if you truly want to understand its strength, you must go back nearly 4,000 years, to Mesopotamia, to the journey of Prophet Abraham, to the leadership of Prophet Moses, and to the tragedy of World War II. Because this is not just the story of a country, it is the story of survival, it is the story of identity, and it is the story of a nation that refused to disappear. Modern Israel, power, struggle, and legacy. The story of the Jewish people did not end in 1948. That year marked the official creation of the Israel, but the journey that began nearly 4,000 years ago continued. The challenges of building a nation from scratch were immense. They faced enemies, droughts, wars, and political uncertainty. Yet, in the midst of these struggles, Israel began to rise as one of the most remarkable stories in modern history. From survival to innovation. In its early years, Israel had limited resources. Water was scarce, agriculture was challenging, and the young country faced constant threats from neighboring nations. Yet the people of Israel used their centuries-long experience of survival and resilience to innovate. They created advanced irrigation systems to transform arid deserts into fertile farmland. They developed new methods of agriculture that allowed them to feed their growing population and even export food internationally. Education became a national priority, with a focus on science, technology, and research. Universities and research centers quickly became world-class, producing innovations that would influence the global stage. The military and security struggle. From its inception, Israel had to defend itself. Immediately after its creation, multiple neighboring countries attacked, seeking to destroy the fledgling nation. Israel's military, though initially small, had to grow rapidly. Strategy, intelligence, and courage became the hallmarks of the Israeli Defense Forces. Over the decades, Israel continued to face wars, skirmishes, and political threats. Each challenge made the nation stronger. Lessons from ancient struggles, from the desert wanderings of Moses to the early struggles in Egypt, shaped the national psyche. Survival, courage, and unity became not just values, but necessities. Relations with the United States. One of the most critical factors in Israel's modern success was its relationship with the United States. Reminds the world that even after tragedy, such as the horrors of World War II, recovery and growth are possible. From Mesopotamia to modern Tel Aviv, from shepherds to scientists, from ancient slaves to innovators and soldiers, the journey of Israel spans millennia. It is a story of courage, faith, and determination, a story that continues to inspire millions around the globe. Israel today. Today, Israel is a nation of approximately 9 million people. It is a democracy, a hub of innovation, and a powerful regional force. Its military continues to be strong, its economy continues to grow, and its citizens continue to celebrate their rich heritage. Israel's journey from scattered tribes to a modern state is a testament to human resilience. Every technological invention, every scientific breakthrough, and every cultural achievement is rooted in thousands of years of history, a history that began with a single man's faith in a promised land. The eternal legacy. The story of Israel is not just about borders or politics. It is about the survival of a people, the preservation of culture, and the triumph of hope over despair. From the deserts of Egypt to the hills of Jerusalem, from the exiles of Europe to the streets of Tel Aviv, this story is living proof that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, humanity can endure and flourish. 4,000 years of history have shaped a nation, a people, and a legacy that will never be forgotten. The journey continues, and the world watches as Israel writes the next chapters of its extraordinary story.